Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the series of Marfond webinars. Thank you for joining us in this edition of today, where we're going to be talking about why fish replenishment zones are important for the restoration of fisheries. The objective of this webinar is to strengthen the conservation of the mar and its associated resources by establishing and improving fishery recovery or replenishment zones and what their ecological impact and fishery impacts are for the region in a positive manner. This is one of the first webinar of 5 that we're going to be developing between 2026 and 2027. We hope to be sharing the second webinar in November of this year. So please stay connected to our social networks. A little bit of housekeeping. We have simultaneous interpretation today. So on screen, you can follow the instructions to connect to the interpretation. Here you can select the language of your preference. If you want to listen to the interpretation only, you can mute original audio. Some basic rules for the webinar. We encourage a space of learning and respect. We also request that your microphones and cameras be turned off during the webinar to avoid disruption. Please, if you can, please write your name, country, and organization so that we can get to know you better and learn more about where you're joining us from. And if you're on Zoom, you can do this, and on the chat on Facebook. You can also type your questions or comments in the chat. Please ensure that these are related to the topic of discussion. After the presentations, we will be having a Q&A section that our presenters or speakers are going to be answering. The opinions expressed are the sole responsibility of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the opinion or position of Marfund. We also want to share with you that we have in Marfund a grievous and complaint mechanism where you can submit any complaints or grievances if you have any. And through this mechanism, we can follow up on any questions, concerns, or complaints regarding activities linked to your project, the projects that we are associated with. So please take a screenshot of this so that you can take note of our QR code and be able to have access to the mechanism. This mechanism is also available on our website if you need to access the QR code. Without further ado, we want to share with you that this series of webinars is part of a series called Fisheries for the Future. The program of protection and restoration of the natural capital of oceans to support and strengthen resilience in the region to develop social economic development in support of UNDP, GEF, and the UNOPS, we are working with a project called Fisheries Replenishment Zone in the Mesoamerican Reef System. This project has the purpose of strengthening the conservation of the mar and its associated resources by establishing and improving fishery replenishment zones for protection of these areas of biodiversity and the sustainability of fisheries. So we're very pleased to begin this series of webinars with three speakers that we have invited and who will be sharing their experience and their knowledge with us. First, we will begin with Dr. Abel Antonio Carrias. Dr. Carrias is the regional director of the Organization for the Fisheries and Aquaculture sector of the Central American Isthmus, OSPESCA. He has more than 14 years of experience in fisheries, aquaculture, marine biology, and natural resource management in the government sectors, the academic, private, and consulting sectors as well. He also has a PhD in fisheries and aquaculture from the Auburn University with research specializing in fish health and biological solutions for disease in agriculture. He also has broad experience in public policy and international cooperation with over 25 consulting projects at the national and regional levels, extensive track record of international collaboration, including projects with FAO, WWF, the Caribbean Development Bank, and the Nature Conservancy. He is a specialist in sustainability and science diplomacy with experience in capacity building, sustainable aquaculture, and regional policy formulation. So without further ado, we thank Dr. Carrias for his participation and for his presentation today on the current status of fisheries in the Mar. Thank you, Ana Beatriz. We hear you well. Yes, we can see your screen very well now. So I first want to thank you for inviting me. And I'm here at OSPESCA greeting you, the audience. Today I'm going to present to you the current status of fisheries in the Mar. Before I begin with my topic, I want to talk about OSPESCA, which is the fisheries sector organization for the Central American Isthmus. And now we talk of the members of the SICA countries because the Dominican Republic is not part of the Isthmus of Central America, but part of the SICA. Los Pesca began in 1995 with the San Salvador law or bill. Its purpose is to coordinate the definition, execution, and follow-up of strategies, policy, and projects. And in San Salvador, is where our offices are. This regional direction, as I mentioned, is registered under the General Secretariat of SICA. It's a mechanism that strengthens the legal framework to harmonized policies of sustainable management of shared marine resources and aquaculture. It allows for consolidated regional operations, strengthening of negotiation at different levels, and strengthens social economic development of fisheries communities and aquaculture communities. Its main purpose is to coordinate the definition, execution, and follow-up of political strategies and projects related to the legal framework and regional scope. This legal framework has binding agreements that are extremely important because at a regional level, we can be able uh, to prepare joint agreements which allow for more streamlined, sustainable development activities in fisheries and aquaculture. And these are integrated to the member countries of Central America and the Dominican Republic. There are three governing bodies. The Council of Ministers are the high-level decision makers of this body. These are the fisheries and aquaculture authorities of each country. The executive committee, which follows up and provides and evaluates the integration policy. This committee, the technical committee, is comprised by the aquaculture and fisheries directors, which provide scientific and technical support. We also have the regional directorate of the SICA in San Salvador, coordinating the OSPESCA initiatives. Now that we know a little bit about the responsibilities and roles, we are related to the MAR through the authorities, fisheries and aquaculture authorities, specifically through Belize authorities, Guatemala, Honduras authorities. At the level of PESCA, MAR has a very important marine biodiversity, having over 500 species of fish, 65 stony coral species, 250 mollusks, and a great number of crustaceans, which was with one being the most spiny lobster and Caribbean, one of the emblematic ones. According to the information that we have, coral systems provide 10% of global fish production at a world level, providing snappers, groupers, the conch, the sea cucumber, Caribbean spiny lobster, which are some of the very important commercial value in fishing species, additional to other species that are very important. Here we can see a list of some of these species, additional to the ones I've mentioned. In particular, snapper and grouper, we have other species in the list. Sardines, shark, rays, and other are very important in the MAR. According to the MAR report, this is health evaluation or assessment of the MAR ecosystem. There are a total of over 9,000 fishers, which are a number that is increasing, specifically in the case of Mexico. Belize specifically has 3,540 fishermen, Honduras 4,300, Guatemala over 1,000, and Mexico over 1,000. This is not the only official figure or number. There's no one figure. It's very hard to define the number of fish, informal or artisanal fishermen, in the Mar because they are at a informal scale and small scale. However, some of the information we have available at national level can help to give you an idea of the numbers. In Honduras, for example, there are over 10,000 artisanal fishers or small fishers that depend on this livelihood. In Belize, there are numbers of around 3,000, over 3,000 licensed fishermen. In Mexico, specifically in the Quintana Roo area and Guatemala, there are many communities throughout the Mar that are in great numbers, and it's very difficult to keep track of the high number of fishermen. Despite this, it, it's important to know that this region is highly important for the economy and the social aspects of livelihoods of people. There are ab- about 2 million people in this region that depend directly from marine resources of the Mar. So this is a very, very important source of income and livelihoods and food for these communities. When we talk about the number of vessels, this is also not a fixed number. We have data that over 95% of the fishing fleet are artisanal vessels or minor vessels that are fiberglass boats or wooden boats that have size of 12 to 10 meters, typically operated by four fishermen. The industrial vessels are over 15 meters long, and they're minimum and very restricted in these protected areas. The numbers you see on screen in Honduras, for example, there are vessels that are larger than those that are considered small. There are 125 vessels for lobster fishing, seven for sea cucumber, and in Quintana Roo, seven vessels for shrimp and 19 for scaled species. According to the FAO figures for Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras, and the CONAPESCA numbers for given by Quintana Roo, we can see that the volume of fishing or fish biomass has been sustained in similar magnitudes throughout the last 4 years, with an increment of 21,000 tons over the last 4 years, given the numbers of captures of conch and lobster. Mm, There has been a decrease of numbers of grouper and snapper because these lower size or juvenile fishes are being captured before their maturity. According to studies in the Mar region, risk resilience financing information has provided that the Mar provides $183 million US dollars in fishing, which is a number very there the percentages are on screen. It's important to highlight that fisheries are a very important source of income, contributing to food security to small communities around the Mar. Fishing activities are also related to tourism activities. So it's very, very difficult to be able to determine a specific value surrounding it, given other activities that increment its value. The regulation or the control fishing are are being upheld by different laws and norms at different levels, international, regional, and local levels. The screen shows you how in the Caribbean there are different norms, codes of conduct established by the FAO for responsible fishing, the voluntary directives for sustainable fishing, and SICA or ICAT recommendations for the reduction of abandoned nets and mitigation of ghost fishing, as well as those established by the International Commission for the Conservation of the Atlantic Tuna, known as ICAT acronym. At a regional level, we have the OSPESCA norm or framework based on its protocols and articles established where decisions that have been made by the Ministry Council of the member countries are agreements that are of a binding and obligatory character of compliance. These norms for compliance, obligatory compliance, are there are 11 of these rules related to uh, fishing and aquaculture registry, lobster fishing in the Caribbean, satellite monitoring in the of vessels, the norms against shark fishing, positive exclusion of turtles, the illegal eradication of illegal fishing, and prevention of these measures against and control of prevention of disease for the shrimp cultivation, production of also different snacks with these species. So these are norms and rules additional to others. There's also national norms that regulate fishing. There's seasonal bans, the minimum size fishing and fishing gear. There's also the different decrees and laws at a national level for the different countries. It's important to note that we recognize the importance of evaluating these norms at a constant level to be able to keep them updated and or more modern. Despite these norms at regional, international, local levels, we recognize that population of species are under threat by different factors. The list here shows that illegal the fishing, non-declared, not regulated, and the use of fishing methods and poaching are all becoming an issue. There's also responsible tourism, residual water, and the contamination by these waters, uh, plastic contamination, and the increment of sargassum in the area are all threats that or challenges that need to be addressed. Climate change, as we know, is very well known how it affects the environment conditions and the introduction of invasive species such as lionfish, which are also additional challenges that the region is facing. What is the how are we addressing these challenges? There are many strategies. Some are on screen, like or ordinance measures based on data and science, strengthening of institutional capacity, training events, and exchange of lessons learned, work through governance, and working in the development of responsible uh, fish replenishment zones and fishery committees, participating in national international networks, and management of programs and roadmaps projects. At a regional level, one of the instruments that is promoted is the regional strategy for blue, blue growth, known as ERCA. The strategy addresses the topics of sargassum, plastic contamination, the use of subproducts of fishing, spatial marine planning, fish product commercialization, and the security of fisheries in the sea, and it all focused in the development of aquaculture and preventing illegal fishing that is undocumented and unregulated. We also have additional regional ordinance actions such as conservation of species, as sharks and rays, and other technical guidelines and manuals for fish bans and evaluation of lobster fishing. In the recent Ministry Council of Fishing approved a new regional integration policy known as PINPESCA, with the purpose of maintaining a constant attitude, effort, and result of improvement of management of fishing and aquaculture in the context of fishing and aquaculture that is responsible. This considers the blue transformation, nutrition and security, food security, improvement of conditions of fishermen and aquaculture in the region, giving the next 10 years its objectives. These are some priority areas. This policy was developed in a consultative manner or process with diverse consultation levels at different countries, the member countries, and different parts or stakeholders, recognizing the most important topics to address. We recognize that there is a potential to address them as well. These are the 7 priority strategies or axes, which are on screen. Is strengthening. The first one is strengthening institutional governance, scientific management, sustainable and responsible fishing, uh, uh, aqua, sustainable aquaculture, participation of leadership and integration of the different sectors, and e equity. With the support of the AIDA Association, we are working on a proposal of a plan of reef management with a fishing focus for the Sika region, specifically focused in its first stage in the Caribbean and then move to the Pacific. The plan contemplates a vision of the current status, including the state of the reef, norms, the update of the situation of fisheries, participation of women and young people, defining lines of action and with indicators such as a roadmap for its implementation. The construction of this plan requires the participation of all the different stakeholders. So I want to take this opportunity to invite you to be part of this process. we are going to be contacting you soon so you can join us in this process. This is all for now, and thank you for everyone. And I appreciate any questions at the end.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for providing us with context regarding the regulations, documents, and actions that OSPESCA is working on in the region, not only in the Mar, but also in the Caribbean. Now, let's welcome Omar Rivera. Omar is Mentor for Change at Comunidad y Biodiversidad, COBI. He is a marine biologist with training in sustainability sciences. He has experience in community-based marine conservation, participatory monitoring, and socio-ecological resilience. He has worked closely with communities in the Mexican Caribbean to develop conservation initiatives that integrate local knowledge, community science, and collaboration processes aimed to strengthen marine governance and sustainable fisheries. Today he will present what are the fish replenishment zones and how do they work. He will discuss the current status in the region, how many there are, and where they are located.
Okay, so thank you all for allowing me to participate today. We're going to be now talking a little bit about what COBI is. We are a civil society organization with 27 years of experience working with fisheries communities in Mexico and expanding our work throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, working with marine conservation and sustainable fisheries with communities. I want to give a little bit of a context. And within the problems that we live in the world, for 30 years now, we have seen the shift in how important the local knowledge has to be included in conservation and work. And I'm talking about this because the tools of conservation and the conservation areas, marine conservation areas, were designed as top-down strategies with exclusion, without any consultation. And this was all under the norms. And these are how some tools were created, known as ZRPs or fish replenishment zones. But these are bottom-up strategies, which are delimited polygons. And these are part of the participatory agreement. And this perspective of empowering people and protect the ocean is how these management tools are come into place.
The idea is to restore the mass, the fishing mass, trying to ensure social and economical benefits and improve the food security. What happens with these populations are two biological phenomena that is happening in the replenishment zones. The spillover effects, where there is migration of youth and adults to the open fishery zones. And also we have the recruitment effect, where we have the export of larvae and eggs by sea currents into the open ocean. So then this helps us give some context to the MAR, to the Mesoamerican region, and each country that is part of the region contributes and they respond to their own national reality, but they contribute to this collective perspective. Let's go country by country. In Mexico, we have the ZRPs, the fishing refuge. They operate promoted by the fishing cooperatives in alliance with NGOs. The ones who promote these initiatives are the cooperatives. In Belize, we have the replenishment zones. This is very important because they are part of a national policy where all the territorial waters is zoned to prevent problems. In Guatemala, we have the replenishment zones, the fishing replenishment zones, and these are the same initials where we have agreements of co-management between community fishing committees and government authorities in protected areas and fishing areas. In Honduras, we have replenishment zones that are also under the co-management, and they are under patronage and committees of fishermen with the forest authorities. So this is an overview about the tool, how this tool is working in the MARC countries. So here is a slide where you can see the official names of these instruments and for you to know which are the authorities, the regulating authorities. Now, if we focus on the Mexican Caribbean, I would like to tell you more about the experience that we've had in the zones in Mexico. We have 10 current polygons of we have 10 that are current and 8 that have expired. Under the Mexican rules, we have 4 types: totally permanent, total temporal, partial permanent, and partial temporal or temporary. Okay, if you remember, who are promoting these areas are the cooperatives. So the intention to have these alternatives of fishing refuges is based on the priorities for the priorities that these cooperatives identify in their own sites. They take the measures that are adapted to their own realities. So I'm going to tell you more about the current ones in the Quintana Roo area. One of the cooperatives here is called the Fishers of Vigia Chico. This refuge is focused on protecting the Caribbean grouper. So here we have another cooperative, which is Cozumel. One of the fishing refuges is one of the oldest ones in Mexico, and another one in the southern part of Baja California. This was in 2012, and these are 8 polygons that are in this bay. This is done by the cooperative in Cozumel. If we go to see how this work has been functioning with these fishery refuges, it's important to mention that we have generated information based on community participation. This information, this data collection has been done because of the capacities of the fishers. So throughout the years, we have worked with doing biological monitoring. As I was saying, the cooperatives, the fishing cooperatives, they are focused on the species of their interest. So in this process, doing monitoring, we concentrate on species that are of interest for these community groups, for these cooperatives. As you can see here, we have a series of data that we've been collecting over 10 years. Every year, we're working with the cooperatives to have key information about the health status of the fisheries that they handle. Another thing that is very important is that it's important to understand the variables in these areas. So we have been doing ocean monitoring. So it's the oceanographic monitoring to understand the environment. Another thing that we've been doing and that we've noted is that it's very important to innovate in terms of tools to get the data collection without jeopardizing the quality of information. So we have innovated with technology so that we can have this information. One of the things that we have implemented is acoustic monitoring. We did that in one of the refuges. We are implementing this technology to understand from a different perspective, to understand the health of this area. In general terms, participatory monitoring which is the essence of this work using this tool. We are promoting these processes of reflection, learning, raising awareness, and sustainable ownership of natural resources. And I would like to give you a perspective of what happens in these fishing refuges if from the social perspective. Throughout all these years, working with people has given us a lot of learning in this path. One of the first things that I want to say is that we've been observing that there are equal participation spaces. So we know that one of the challenges in the sector is the inclusion, gender inclusion, and acknowledging the value of women within the fishing activities. What we have observed is that regardless of the objectives and tangible goals, such as the recovery of biomass and all the objectives, all the targets that we establish, there are other things that have social weight, which is important. One of these things is the participation, equal participation, decision-making, internal governance, direct participation in the monitoring activities, doing the data collection and the data analysis in these fishing refuges. This has been a process of capacity development, capacity strengthening, where we have more than 3 generations of fishers that have been strengthened, not only in technical skills, but also in soft skills. Here, I have an example. This is what it means to work in these refuges. We have the first community center of research and monitoring in Quintana Roo. And the one in Punta Allen, where the cooperative is quite involved, and the key actors of the community have been empowered to carry out activities directly without having an NGO with them. One of the key aspects that is happening in relation to the operation of these fishery refuges, not only in Mexico, but also in the other countries of the Mar, the experiences of Guatemala, Honduras, Belize, we have fishermen and fisherwomen who are training new people to transfer this knowledge that they acquired about 12, 13 years ago, everything related to the fishery refuges, and they're trying to plant this seed for the new generations. I think that at this moment, it's a very good moment to reflect, because if we want to look at this regionally, there are so many things that have happened that we have learned and that we can share between countries with this vision of the Mesoamerican Reef. There are several challenges too, and we have identified them in Mexico, and we think it's important to share this with you and to share this with the other countries of the region and internationally. The things that we've learned from the monitoring, everything has a cost. That's something that we have learned. So we need to consider long-term plans. We need to figure out about the sustainability when the funders leave, what's going to happen. So this is something that we've seen in the past years. Abel mentioned that there are direct problems of climate change in these fishing communities, and there are also external economic factors that 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 they do not have anything to do with the direct community groups, but they have to do with illegal fishing, with the buyers. And so there are other situations that also affect the work of these replenishment areas. To wrap up, and looking at this from a more expanded vision, I think that one of the regional challenges start to start using these learnings is to ensure that the laws back permanently these community efforts. And also, we need to visualize new technologies to facilitate participatory monitoring. And we know that everything has a cost, so we need also to have priorities, and we need to diversify in a very just manner, in a fair manner, the income of the families who participate in this initiative. If we look at this as a puzzle, there are several things that we can learn from each country of the Mesoamerican region. So we need to continue building these tools that have been very successful. The restoration, the replenishment of a species is important, and this has also a very important factor of social cohesion. And this is all I have to say. I leave you with that. Thank you. Thank you, Omar, for sharing about the COBI experience. Some of the partners that we're working with have already contacted you to learn from these processes and these experiences. And right now we're going to give to welcome Master Ana Giró. She's the coordinator for Guatemala for Healthy Reefs for Healthy People. Ana has over 20 years of experience in research, conservation, and management of coral reefs in Guatemala and the region. She's a pioneer in the research of coral reefs in Guatemala with experience in mapping, monitoring, and characterization of reefs, including the discovery and documentation of the Cayman Crown Reef. She led the research and the technical process to back the creation of the first areas of fishing replenishment, and she contributed to the protection of habitats and fisheries. She has also collaborated in conservation projects funded by USAID and the Global Environment Fund and other international initiatives. She was recognized in 2025 with the John Ogden President's Membership Award of the International Coral Reef Society for her contributions to science and conservation of coral reefs. Let's welcome Anna so that she can present the topic, ecological benefits of the replenishment zones and the fisheries in the Mesoamerican region. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I'm going to share the screen right now.
Okay, for me, it's a great pleasure to be able to share the benefits of the fish replenishment zones for the ecosystems and fisheries of the Mar. We have been working for many years in Guatemala on this topic and with partners in the region, such as COBI, working hand in hand with many learnings that were presented by Omar as well. And we have been able to adapt these lessons learned to the benefit of our ecosystem. A little bit of what Healthy Reefs for Healthy People is. We have been monitoring the reef for over 20 years now and with report cards developed for the MAR. So we basically create a data set for reports for the reef's health at a regional level throughout Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. We publish these openly every year. The first one, or every couple of years, starting in 2000, sorry. And now we are about to launch our new report card at the end of this year, 2026. Basically, the report card tells us what is the response of the reef related to management. How is it responding? And here we can see that the importance of living coral, the presence of fleshy macroalgae, fish biomass, herbivore biomass, and commercial fishing. Since we're talking about fish replenishment zones and the benefit to ecosystems, we're going to focus on commercial fish biomass and its changes throughout time. Our last report card, published 2 years ago, 2024, showed that commercial fish biomass throughout the reef showed a poor result, a critical result, and that is due to several factors. We know by Dr. Abel's presentation and Mr. Omar's presentation that there is a reduction in fish biomass of commercial fish focused in the industry and illegal fishing and the non-declared the loss of fish in the habitat of living coral, and climate change is also constantly being impacted. And the graph, as you can see, has been changing throughout the years for the four countries, and we can see how the indicator is changing. What we have learned throughout all these years collecting this data is that data leads to action. what do I mean by this? And with the images below is that our data allows us to compare the location of these areas with relationship to their protection or not. And that is what we monitor. Gray areas are basically areas that are located outside of marine protected areas or MPAs. And the other three areas are MPAs, but with different levels of protection. The green bar is an MPA, but with for general use, which is has a very low level of restriction for fishing. We have the purple bar, which are highly protected areas, which have certain restrictions for fishing, but it is not completely banned or closed. And we have the completely or fully protected areas, which are the which is the pink areas. And we decided that to compare these, and we see that fish herbivore biomass on the right and commercial fish on the right in the graph, or on the left, sorry, and how we can see that the increase in protection increases the fish biomass. So this shows that fish replenishment zones are very important for fish for these areas, and these help in this overflow effect that we're going to talk about later. And the data provides this result of the increase in fish biomass. Something that we also see in analyzing grouper and snapper, which are important commercial fish in the region, is on the left we see the snapper species and the different species of grouper on the right. But here I want to show you the dotted line that shows us when the fish or these species reach their sexual maturity or reproduction. And our data showed that what we can see is that we are observing not only small size fish that reach sexual maturity for reproduction, but also data of species that are within their sexual maturity and are located within the fish replenishment zones or areas that are in fully protected areas. So this data tells us how these juvenile fish that have not reached their sexual maturity size is an alarming number. But why? Because we need large fish to be able to have more fish larvae, basically. So this shows you a comparison of the different uh, size and what how many can be produced. So a 60 centimeter snapper produces more than a lower size fish. So we need more large fish for more reproduction and more larvae, of course. And this will increase the fish biomass in our in our reefs, so which are so important for fisheries as well. We have also launched some campaigns in in these fish replenishment zones that are so important. And we mentioned that there are different areas that are fully protected areas. There's a general use area and the highly protected areas. Fish replenishment zones that are totally or fully protected present a higher fish biomass and larger fish. These are critical sites for fish recovery or population recovery and reproductive feasibility. because of the presence of large fish. And this requires an adequate control and surveillance. We also have to note that, and this is something that was published by several organizations, and some of you are present here where we participated in the creation of this document of the physical principles for the design of fish replenishment zones in the Mar, to show how the science behind it, the design is important, but in hand or together with local knowledge. All these principles are only going to be effective or functional if we have surveillance and patrolling in the area, and that the local fishermen of the area agree with it. So there are different principles that were addressed that we saw that were important, such as representativity of the habitat, diversification of risk, protection of critical habitat, and special and unique areas, the size of the areas also, the space between areas of these fish replenishment zones, and how distant one from the other are, the place in the time of protection of these areas, and the resistance of these against climate change and mitigation of threats that are foreign to the area. So here I want to show that what a fish replenishment zone does is that it's a closed area that is not is closed to fishing with a high level of control and surveillance established in very important sites that may be fish aggregation areas where certain types or species of fish are reproducing in types of times of the year, maybe a key area or habitat with a healthy coral reef habitat, and with areas with high probability of benefits, with a high control and surveillance of this control and this spillover effect that we call, that will benefit neighboring areas. This is also related to what we want to protect, what is that we want to recover. There might be an area that has dropped down or the number has decreased, and we want to protect. What do we want to recover? What is our focal objective in these fishing areas? It's not just that I want to do it and everything is going to work perfectly well and everything is going to, and there's going to be an automatic spillover effect. It all depends on the design, the location of the area, the type of species we want to recover, etc. And that is why it's also important to see connectivity of these areas. We need to ensure that these fish replenishment zones are close enough to be able to allow the displacement or the movement of these targeted species between habitats. This graph shows the result of one of our report cards that shows the life cycle of the grouper. And here we can see that they're related to mangroves, reefs, and they're in the stages that they are growing, the adult stages, but there's also the spawning areas where the groupers aggregate for reproduction. So the grouper is not only in the reef areas, but they swim uh, to different areas, short and far away distances, to be able to reach these aggregated reproductive areas of the grouper. So that is why it's important to protect the reef where the grouper is located, but if we do not protect the area where they are moving to and from, then nothing will be achieved. This is why it's so important to ensure this connectivity. And that's also how important to take care of the other additional ecosystems, such as mangroves, which have decreased in 20%. We have had loss due to overfishing as well. Other threats such as coastal development, contamination, overfishing, climate change, and other issues. Fish replenishment zones allow for connectivity in key areas or strategic areas. Fish aggregation zones are very important as well, which are spawning and nurturing areas that need to be protected because they are very, very vulnerable to fishing. So an adequate protection needs to go in hand with control and surveillance to foster or promote this spillover effect and able to recover populations that we're interested in recovering in these neighboring areas. This is also an infographic that we published in one of our report cards. Our report cards are developed in hand or together with our partners. It's not just Healthy Reefs doing it alone. There are over 74 partners in the region. All of them participate in this process and share the reason why a tool for recovery of the fish is effective in the Mar and what we must do. And this cross-border collaboration is essential to promote involvement of fisheries and communities and promote management and access rights, such as the uh, agreement that Belize has with fisheries based in management of access rights, which have been very successful. The promotion and sales of sustainable seafood, the importance of protection of monitoring, air protection of areas and fish aggregation uh, areas, safeguarding of critical habitats, etc. Something that has been mentioned very often throughout the years with our partners and fishers is value chain. For example, here in Guatemala, many of the fishers mention that the income for the fishermen is much, much smaller compared to the what the middlemen receive that do the purchase of the seafood and the final product of the income is greater. So this is a topic that needs to be addressed jointly to reduce this value chain so that fishermen receive a greater income. So this is a very important tool in this process. So to conclude, it's important, it's necessary to increase the number and size of fish replenishment zones together with communities. These have to be key sites. For me, it's very important to protect these fish aggregation areas and involving in strengthening monitoring at a regional coordinated manner, involving communities, having them and become leaders in this process so that this is a sustainable and successful process. Restore habitats and key species and reefs. As you can see here, it says it takes a village, but we need a whole community of people that are well informed to be able to join efforts and influence the health of the Mar actively to be able to have this healthy network of fish replenishment areas. And this is our air, or all our these are all our partners that we work throughout the region. These are their logos. Also, thank you again. And if there are any questions, I am happy to answer them. Thank you so much, Anna, for your presentation and all the work that you do and Healthy Reefs for Healthy People have done in the region. So now we're going to move over to the question. So, Kobe, a question for Kobe. With the experience that Kobe has fish replenishment zones, how much time has it taken to establish them? And if it takes too long, what do you do to encourage fishermen not to become discouraged in this process?
I was telling you in my presentation that in 2012, 2016, we started working with our project. It has not been a short-term project. When we talk about this issue, is that's important to know that this doesn't happen. The changes that don't happen overnight. So it's important to communicate this. And as I said, that for one of the cooperatives, there are 3 generations of fishermen and fisherwomen who are involved. And I think that's key. That's a key factor. We need to keep up the motivation, to keep up the project, and to involve people that maybe at the beginning you thought that they were not going to be interested, but we have had surprises. And one of the things that have been very important also is to understand governance, internal governance of the communities, and the support from cooperatives and how these cooperatives are organized. These 2 things have been very important to keep up with the efforts throughout the years. Thank you, Omar. There's another question from Nadia. It could be for Anna or for Omar or for both. What is the reality and the impact of the fishing cooperatives versus the bigger commercial companies, in the replenishment of the area? Okay, talking about the commercial companies, I'm speaking about Guatemala in this case. There are some companies, some commercial companies, but they do not, they, 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 they are actually smaller mid fishery. They don't portray themselves as companies. I think the value chain is very important in that case because for the small scale fishers, the ones that we call artisanal fishers versus the bigger ones with a commercial fleet, that has impact. We have a fleet of shrimp boats. That's the vessels, the boats are not that big, but the impact is big because of the type of fishery it is. Uh, so there are some agreements between fishers, the shrimp, between the ones doing fishing shrimp and the others, they do rotations. So then they do rotation with the artisanal fishers. So the shrimp fishery has more impact, uh, talking about the ecosystem. And okay, that's one factor. And the other part is the value chain. We want the smaller fisher to have more income. So that's another factor to consider. Thank you. I don't know if you want to say some, maybe. Okay, I think it's important to mention in Mexico and Quintana Roo particularly, there have been issues with fishing, larger scale fishing. Uh, Part of the work around the replenishment areas has to do with community surveillance. In this sense, we we can look at threats near near these replenishment areas. So there is capacity development about how to protect those areas, and they complement that with governmental institutions and local efforts. So the threats around these areas, that's what we do. So what do you need from Dr. Carrias? What do you need when the rules and needs of their fishing communities are not the same? What is needed? It is important a consultative process, a strong process. In OSPESCA, we open a consultative space with the communities, with fishers, through the association. We want them to be represented. We want the representativity, the representation. The space is open. They are part of the process and they participate in drafting the policies. And that's related to the fishing and all the activities related to fishing. And there are some specific situations that are different in the region. There's another question for Anna. What is the spillover effect? How much is the spillover effect in surrounding areas, depending on the zone? It depends. It depends on the species. The spillover effect depends on the species, and you can see this effect after some time. After we have established the replenishment zone and we've been doing control and surveillance, and we know that this is important for the fish. The spillover effect is very important. There's data, 50% of spillover effect. It depends on the effect, and this spillover effect is successful in the surrounding areas. So there are even images. There are drone images in the replenishment areas and also in the border area with the surrounding areas. You can see there's evidence of this spillover, and also in relation to the mar, the larvae, the spawning. Omar mentioned this, the spillover effect, not only for the species, the youth and adult species, but also the larvae, the connectivity. This is very important. Well, thank you, Anna. On behalf of Mar Fund, we thank the ProCaribe project and our panelists today for giving us this approach to the fishing area in the fishing replenishment initiatives in the Mar. We will continue sharing other experiences and inviting the fishers themselves so that they can tell us firsthand how this process has been for them and how important this is. So we thank all the panelists It's been a pleasure to see you, and we want to wish you a good afternoon. And we will continue communicating through social media.